Destined to become one of the most romantic figures in the history of Freemasonry, Andrew Michael Ramsay was born in Ayr, Scotland in about 1686. He entered university at the age of 14 and studied the classics, maths, theology, and upon finishing his studies he took up positions as a tutor to the children of the nobility. In the early 1700s he moved to London, ostensibly to learn French. His circle of friends included Isaac Newton, David Hume and John Desaguliers. He left England bound for Holland around 1709 and he is recorded as having joined the Duke of Marlborough's army in Flanders. Then in 1710 he became a pupil of the liberal mystical philosopher Francois Fenelon, the Bishop of Cambrai, and was converted to Roman Catholicism. On Fenelon's death in 1715, Ramsay went on to Paris, where he became a close friend and confidant of Philip d'Orléans, the Prince Regent of France. The Prince was also the Grand Master of the Order of Lazarus, and through that acquaintance Ramsay was able to be admitted into this order, which henceforth qualified him to be known as the Chevalier de Ramsay. In 1723, King James granted him a certificate of nobility, and in 1735 made him a knight and a baron, whereby he became Sir Andrew Michael Ramsay, but he is known to us all in history as Chevalier Ramsay. Ramsay was a novelist, a historian, a religious philosopher and a teacher. He was a Scottish expatriate, yet he was welcomed home from France by the English government. He was a Presbyterian, a Roman Catholic and a Jacobite, yet was awarded an honorary degree from Oxford and was made a Fellow of the Royal Society. He died at Germain-en-Laye near Paris in 1743 and is buried there in the church cemetery. So what about Chevalier Ramsay as a Freemason? Well, in 1730, while visiting England, Ramsay was initiated into Freemasonry in the Horn Lodge in London. This was actually reported in the London Evening Post as occurring on the 16th of March, and he was initiated with several brethren of quite noble birth. He would become a member of the Spalding Gentlemen's Society and of the Royal Society, both so influential in the rise of speculative Freemasonry. Upon Ramsay's return to Paris, he became active in the craft and soon rose to the rank of Grand Orator, as Freemasonry was beginning to form out of the lodges in France and into a grand body. What is the Ramsay Oration or Discourse? In France that time, candidates for the craft were being received in increasing numbers, but the ceremonies were very brief and elementary, giving the candidates little idea of the aims and objectives of the actual craft. Ramsay thought that this was regrettable, so in December 1736 he wrote an oration which he delivered at social boards following initiation ceremonies. This was to become one of the most discussed speeches ever delivered, and it is certain that no other has ever received so much attention, been so misunderstood, or had such an effect on the course and development of Freemasonry. It was most likely delivered on the 27th of December 1736 at the English-speaking St. John's Lodge, although Gould has this date as reported as 1737. I have left some links in the comment section below to some very interesting articles and further discussions on Chevalier Ramsay. These include a transcript of the Gould 1737 version of the oration, and also there is a link to the Chevalier Ramsay Lodge, which is an English-speaking lodge in Belgium, and I particularly draw your attention to the excellent work by Worshipper Martin McGregor of New Zealand. What exactly did Ramsay say in his discourse or oration? Well, quite a lot and not a lot, but I'll give a few examples of his rhetoric regarding the craft in particular. And I make no apologies for not using a Scottish or French-Scottish accent as I recite these. The obligations imposed on you by the order are to protect your brothers by your authority, to enlighten them by your knowledge, to edify them by your virtues, to suffer them in their necessities, to sacrifice all personal resentment, to strive after all that may contribute to the peace and unity of society. We desire to unite all men of enlightened minds, gentle manners and agreeable wit, not only by the love for the fine arts, but much more by the grand principles of virtue, science and religion, where the interests of the fraternity shall become those of the whole human race, whence all nations shall be enabled to draw useful knowledge, and whence the subjects of all kingdoms shall learn to cherish one another without renouncing their own country. The word Freemason must therefore not be taken in a literal, gross and material sense, as if our founders had been simple workers in stone, or merely curious geniuses who wished to perfect the arts. They were not only skillful architects, desirous of consecrating their talents and good to the construction of material temples, but also religious and warrior princes who designed to enlighten, edify and protect the living temples of the Most High. Why the Chevalier Ramsay Lecture Award? The original architects of the Masonic Order of Athelstan took a great deal of modern inspiration from the infamous Ramsay Oration. Ramsay aimed at giving candidates a reason to take pride in the craft and in their heritage. His oration was certainly not a factual history of the craft, but rather an allegorical account of what he perceived the origins to be. As King Athelstan caused the ancient charges to be set down at York, it is thought that the Ramsay Oration was more than just an inspirational charge after initiation. It could also be argued that it was, indeed, Ramsay's own version of those old charges. As I mentioned, the Ramsay Oration has become one of the most discussed speeches ever delivered in Freemasonry, often misunderstood and always misinterpreted in parts, and is naturally used as evidence in the creation myths of many of the higher Masonic orders. However, there is one fact in that the Ramsay Discourse of 1736 or 1737 did directly influence the foundation of a Masonic order nearly 270 years since it was first delivered, and that of course is ours, the Masonic Order of Athelstan. So it was agreed that from our inception that a Chevalier Ramsay lecture would be delivered at the annual assembly meeting of Grand Court, it being awarded to the most thought-provoking, well-researched and inspiring subject matter from any member of our order. This has indeed been the case since our very first annual assembly in 2006. As Grand Master, I was so proud to enshrine in our statutes the mandatory requirement for each court to deliver a lecture at their installation meetings, thus recognising the contribution of Chevalier Ramsay in inspiring anyone, Mason or non-Mason alike, to expand their wisdom, knowledge and understanding. Some 15 years later, the Chevalier Ramsay Lecture Award has become a highly prized and much coveted Masonic accolade. In 2020, I will be introducing some improvements that will surely enhance its lustre in Freemasonry. So brethren, watch this space.